welcome to the program. Earth Day is April 22nd, and while we've fallen short on some goals, we actually had a lot of successes in the world and here in the Bahamas. Now, to help us talk about Earth Day and some of their own successes, are members of the Nature Conservancy. We have Marcia Musgrove and Shanique Aubrey-Smith. Now, if you would let people first know what your roles are in the actual organization. Mrs. Aubrey-Smith.
Yes.
It's good to see you too.
It's good to see you, Julian. It's been a while. I'm happy to be here today, and sure, I'll talk a little bit about my role. I'm actually the Deputy Director of the Caribbean Division of TNC. So TNC is an international organization that works globally, and we work across the insular Caribbean. And so my role actually is at that focus now. I started here working in the Bahamas only, but was promoted a few years ago into a role that's across the division in multiple countries. And really the crux of it is it's management. So it's a senior leadership role within the division, but also really working with all of our leads in the various countries we work in across the Caribbean to ensure that we are implementing the conservation work we've committed to.
And yet you're still the CEO, if you will, of the Nassau office.
I am not.
You're not
what you would call the CEO of the Bahamas office. Marcia is now kind of in that role, so that's a good segue into Marcia and her current role.
Wow, a couple of years of no stories, and then here we go. And of course, Marcia Musgrove, who of course has been very helpful in a lot of things. Tell us about your role now, Madam CEO.
Well, my official title is that I am the Northern Caribbean Program Director. So I am responsible for implementing the Nature Conservancy's portfolio of conservation work in the Bahamas and any emerging work that comes out of the Turks and Caicos Islands. And I am succeeding Shanique, who started off in this role at the program level, and I started off actually as a policy advisor under her mentorship, and then she was promoted to a post at the division level, which we're quite proud of because this is the first time that somebody from the Caribbean region has actually held that leadership role within this global organization. So we're quite happy about that, and I am happy to kind of step into this role to ensure that we keep doing good work for nature and people in the Bahamas.
And you know, of course, I'm proud of you because, you know, I've been doing some work for about 20 years, and I remember when everyone was in different roles.
Yes.
To see you all rise up like this, and of course, Eleanor had a big position as well, and she's just sitting by her lake.
Yes, she's retired and working for herself.
Pina coladas, I guess.
Yes.
Well, let's get into Earth Day. Planet versus plastics is the theme for this year. And that's a very important thing for us. Because you're still seeing, I was looking at a little video of someone doing a crossing on the jet ski from Florida here. And the amount of plastic he got out of the ocean is just mind-boggling, mind-boggling. How do we get people to understand how detrimental that is?
Well, I think one of the things is just continuing to share stories, repetition, and making reality visible. A lot of times when it comes to things in the environment, we take it for granted because the beach is always there, the fish are always there, we're always able to go and enjoy regatta, and so sometimes we don't think about things that pollute the environment until it impacts us personally or somebody brings a vision forward that shows us the real impact, the amount of plastic or trash that we have in the ocean. And so I think intuitively, a lot of us know, like, we should not discard of these things in the ocean because not only does it look unsightly, there can also be harmful effects on human life as well as on marine life that do things like mistake plastic bags for food or get smothered by plastics. And then there's also chemicals that leach out from plastics in the water that end up in the fish that we like to eat. And so I think, it's micro. So when we have things like an Earth Day, we keep bringing these themes back just as a way of reminding people that we're still on this journey. There's still work to do. We still need to play our part in kind of being responsible stewards of our environment.
And I think it's a bigger challenge for the Bahamas too, because it's not just Bahamians. I mean, there's a lot of yachts coming in here, a lot of cruise ships.
So so what I wanted to point out is, you know, the topic is planet versus plastic, and this is for Earth Day globally, not just in the Bahamas. So the challenge challenge is actually a global one, not just in the Bahamas, but we need to realize when we think about plastics and discarding them, which is a solid waste management issue, we are carrying the load for not just ourselves, the almost 400,000 Bahamians, but all of the 6 to 7 million tourists that are coming here and generating plastics and other types of...
Cooper will be upset if I don't say nearly 10 million.
Okay, nearly 10 million. Thank you, correct me. I stand corrected. So the nearly 10 million people, so that is significantly magnitudes more than the population of the Bahamas. And so when we think about the impacts, it's not just my water bottle, but it's all of the water bottles of these 10 million tourists. So, and that's an impact we're seeing around the world. And you mentioned the microplastics. So people, I think what's important for people to know about is the range of challenges that we're thinking about for plastics. We often hear people talk about plastic bags and plastic bottles, but you have a lot of plastics as key components in a lot of products, shampoos, all sorts of things. And these are tiny, maybe microscopic plastic, but plastic does not decompose. This is the key issue. So when it's generated, it goes into the environment and it never goes away. So this is an issue. One, in terms of space, and as Marcy was saying, the making of plastic, it includes lots and lots of chemicals, right? And these chemicals over a long term can have negative impacts on the environment, on flora, plants, and animals in the environment, but it also circles back to us and our human health. So that's an important connection too between plastics and human health.
All right, no single-use stuff. But the thing is, I remember a couple of years ago that everyone was like, okay, you can make some cassava or bamboo products for utensils. And I'm not hearing about that much more. Did the excitement wear off?
I think I guess the excitement did wear off, as it generally does with most things, but the challenge we have with plastics, because what is the alternative, right? At the end of the day, ease of access and convenience is the factor in what people will use. The other big factor at the end of the day is cost, right? So cost as well as availability. So I think there is more work to be done with making the products more readily available to the average consumers, or maybe to wholesalers who are selling to the average consumers. But globally, there's still a challenge with making the costs of alternative things that may be more sustainable and better for the environment more competitive in comparison to plastic. So this is maybe perhaps one of the barriers we have with the transition away from plastic to other products. But at the same time, this is why education is important. All of us have purchasing power, right? We can decide what we do with our dollar, and we know definitely the dollar seems to be going less and less every day. So this is not an insignificant conversation when I mention the cost, but where people do have that flexibility and the ability to choose, we're calling on people as a tangible way where the everyday person, every one of us can make a difference. Is you can choose when you go to the food store now or to your wholesaler for your next party, beach party, the family reunion, whatever the case may be. We're asking you to look at the packaging that you're purchasing for your cups and your plates, and even for maybe your to-go bags or your swag and whatever you're doing, and try to get those products that seem more sustainable. We do know we do have challenges with our market here in the Bahamas, but we also know the market for importing is big. And so you can also go online and maybe get some products at a more reasonable price that you may not be able to source locally. I wouldn't say that as a first choice, because we want to buy Bahamian and support our local shops. But this is, the reality is a lot of people are buying individual things for themselves and bringing them in through the freight shipping companies. So you can also take advantage of that to get more sustainable products in the country.
I'm going to come back to you with a question related to the work you're doing right now, but let me ask Marcia this. Because really for years it's been, and people don't always realize that, because we know about the Bahamas National Trust and BRIEF, those names were more popular at first, but really the Nature Conservancy is the largest conservation group in the world.
Well, so yes, the Nature Conservancy is actually one of, if not the largest environmental organization in the world. And we have been operating in the Bahamas, had an office or a program in the Bahamas for just over 20 years now. And so I kind of describe it like, people think, well, what's the connection? So the Red Cross, for example, is an international organization, but there's a local society or program that is focused on what are the needs and what are the priorities in this particular country. So that's the way we work. We are global, but we're broken up into regions and divisions. So we fall under the Caribbean division of the Nature Conservancy, of which Shanique is the deputy director. And then in our local program, myself and the other staff here, we are focused on what are the national priorities in conservation that are articulated by the government of the Bahamas. What are the communities concerned about? And we kind of design our work around those things to make sure that the benefits are kind of specific and customized. And so we're happy that we're able to be here and make this kind of contribution to advancing national priorities. But one of the benefits of working for an international organization is we are able to source and call on experts from anywhere in the world for anything that the Bahamas, or like I said, even any emerging requests out of Turks and Caicos. We can reach out to people anywhere in the world, experts. We help to source funding from different places in the world that benefits the Bahamas. And anybody that knows me personally knows, like, I'm a nationalist. Like, I'm all about my country and doing what I can to make it better. And so I'm really happy that I'm able to leverage those resources and expertise to help advance what is important for the country.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm happy to see is that there's so many more environmental organizations. I just named you three, but there's PIMS, the Perry Institute came in, and of course there's Bonefish,
Tarpon
Trust,
Reid
yes.
Justin up in Grand Bahama, and Waterkeepers in Grand Bahama too.
Yes.
So there's, and I think the biggest thing is to see how working in the environment is a real career and profession for Bahamians now.
Yes.
Right? It's a real option, and people are getting good and well-paying jobs and making a difference. Speaking about plastics, though, anyone knows where our friend Dr. Ambrose is, the plastic screen?
Yes,
She's between here and abroad, or?
I can't tell you where she's at this very moment, but a few weeks ago, she is back home. She completed a PhD.
Right, I saw that.
And so those of us who work with her, we're super proud of the work that she has done internationally and continues to do. And she was back on the rock and kind of gearing up for the next phase of her work.
Great.
Yeah.
Now, Earth Day next is April 22nd, as we said. What is TNC doing specifically here and in the region to make the message a little stronger and to get people more involved? Because really what you want is for someone to do something in their own life, in their own space, for Earth Day and beyond. Start by saying what you can do as a group first for Earth Day, what you're doing as a group.
So for our local program, we actually decided this year we would support our local partners because we've gotten quite a few requests for support. So for example, we shared a booth at the Agribusiness Expo on the request of the Department of Marine Resources.
Well received?
Well received. So we were there, we were sharing about some of the work that we do and talking to people about the importance of conservation, especially engaging a number of the school groups and youths that came by. Then we also will be supporting the Earth Day Career Fair that the Department of Environmental Planning and Protection has on the 22nd. The Bahamas Mangrove Alliance will be having like a mangrove planting event and cleanup event in Grand Bahama, so we're going to be going there to support that.
And I'm sorry to stop you there, because I just saw something that almost made me had the fits the other day, that there's a new development somewhere, and they're already raising the mangroves. I mean, how could that happen in 2024 in the Bahamas? Mm-hmm. After all the knowledge we know and have at government level, at local levels, how could that be happening?
Yeah, well, it speaks to the need for things like Earth Day to continue to raise awareness and education. I don't know if we'll ever see a point where we don't have any destruction of habitat at all, because we do have to grow, we do have to develop and ensure, the well-being economically and otherwise of our people. I think the bigger question is, are we acting based on a vision and a plan for the environment and our ecosystems as we move forward, right? Have we identified the places that we feel are most critical to protect and or require some type of management, or maybe those areas that we think can be expendable for things such as development, because we will expand as our population continues to grow. So it's not realistic to say we're never gonna maybe have a land use change away from something like just natural vegetation to a development, homes, hotel, whatever the case may be. You know, in 2019, the government of the Bahamas passed a suite of environmental legislation, the Environmental Planning and Protection Act, etc. These legislations speak to the process for reviewing and approving developments and things that would maybe change land use, in addition to some pre-existing legislation. 2019 is not that long ago, and we all know we had a kind of void of time with COVID-19 for a few years, and so the moving from passing legislation to actually using it and implementing it in terms of the way we're making decisions, approving various types of projects that maybe need to be approved by the government, it's still an area I think that the government as well as other stakeholders are continuing to work on and improve. But hand in hand with that is the education. The biggest leverage point for things like minimizing destruction of the environment is the public. When the public gets very articulate about their position and what they think is important in terms of valuing and protecting and conserving, other stakeholders listen. So this is why we want to say the public has to continue to advocate for the view of we need development, we want the the economic support for our communities, but that cannot be at the expense of the very thing that often is driving the economic support, which is the environment.
But I guess the public saying, I need food today, taking this down will give me the money I need to survive today. I can't worry about that right now. Is that what we're getting?
Well, it's both, and you have views on both sides, and decision makers have to take all those things into account. Because whereas I might feel like, okay, this development here is going to allow me to have a job, there's a fisherman somewhere or eco tour guide somewhere who is also supporting their family, and they were dependent on that area being present. So there's these kind of checks and balances. So you benefit, and then that person may lose. Yeah. Even if we say, oh, they could move to another location, but that's additional time and additional cost and all those considerations. So like Shanique said, one of the approaches that the Nature Conservancy takes is kind of trying to support initiatives at the policy level and at the really systems level and thinking. So, for example, a lot of people who know about us know that we have supported the government of the Bahamas and worked with other stakeholders around creating a network of marine protected areas.
You've come to something that I was going to bring up, because I think the first time you and I worked together, it was on a show for marine protected areas.
Yes.
So where are we on that now?
So the Bahamas government made a commitment many years ago from the late 90s to kind of identify what are these most critical places that we need to keep intact. And that journey started there when the Nature Conservancy started working in the country. We joined that movement to help get that work done. And the goal was to identify 20% of the nearshore environment and have that in protected areas with different levels of management. And so over the years, we've worked hand in hand, like I said, with government and other key stakeholders, and now we're just over 17%. So the government almost hit that 20% mark, and so there's still more work to do there. But the main thing now is we have more marine protected areas that different stakeholders have identified as important. And now we need to ensure that those areas are going to be effectively managed to deliver on what they're intended to do. So that's kind of like the next phase of work that we're focused on supporting, along with, like I said, we work with a lot of other partners. We do a lot of collaboration because it takes a village to do this work. And that's where we'll focus our attention, because then, okay, even though we may have to put the development over here, we've done our best to secure this breeding habitat for conch or fish, or this grouper spawning aggregation over here, because we need these organisms to keep reproducing so that we can keep gaining benefits. We need that Seahorse National Park that some of those 10 million tourists are coming and spending their money to see. We need that to be intact. So we want to focus on what's most strategic to protect and concentrate our efforts there.
Mm-hmm. Like you said, the theme is planet versus plastics. Now, I was a bit surprised to see on the earthday.org website that there's now a push for the UN treaty, for a UN treaty on plastic pollution. Mm-hmm. I'm surprised there isn't one already. Your thoughts?
Yeah, many reasons for that. It takes a while to get the whole world aligned. You remember the UN now services the entire planet. Most of the countries in the planet are part of the UN, and everybody is in a different place in terms of its growth, understanding, and even priority of where does this issue fit in with us. So that's one thing. Plastics is we have so many systems and products tied to plastic. So the implications of trying to make that shift is similar to fossil fuels and the issues related to climate change. We have built so many systems and so many food chains, for lack of a better term, food chains being like market chains around it. It's an inertia that takes a lot to work around. In addition to, you're going to have direct opposition. Many people are benefiting from plastics, whether it's from monetary benefits or otherwise. And so, getting those people on board with something like that takes time. So I think plastics is actually a recent phenomenon. We maybe in the shorter kind of time frames of humans think plastics have been around for many years,
only
but
about 6 years.
yeah, but
60
but it
years.
truly in terms of the expansion and this kind of uptake so holistically globally of plastics, it's probably like you say maybe on the order of about 50 or maybe 50, 60, 70 years. So it took a while in that arc of learning and understanding to go from you have a new product, the excitement of the new product and the convenience and ease of it, to understanding the implications and the side effects of that new product, particularly the negative ones over time. So definitely there's been an evolution of people's understanding, and now we're at that stage of the response. The response, so really all of those things when you're dealing with a market chain, a global population, global systems, all of that takes time. So you may say it's surprising. I would say I'm happy we at least at this point. I want to celebrate being there.
I may be a little bit tough on it. But then again, that brings me back to, because we're saying, the scientists like yourselves are saying, hey, we've already passed that 1.5 thing. It's, we're beyond that. Yeah. So we already have a big problem there. Then even though we've had some success at COP, it really isn't the success that we wanted. Yeah. And then the article, if I'm correct, on carbon credits didn't get the actual appreciation that we expected it would get. So how do you, and I guess you can't really push these big companies to do what you want them, or big countries, I should say, to do what you want them to do, because they always end up being the problem.
Well, I would say in some ways all of us are part of the problem. It's maybe the contribution to the problem is bigger from certain actors,
but
right?
We endorsing or ratifying agreements.
And so I don't want us to make everybody else to be the bad guy, because we all have a part to play in sometimes problems, but also the solution. So, I mean, for me, I'm a big believer in everything takes time when we move incrementally. The way we say it in our context in the Bahamas is like you gotta creep before you walk, and then you walk before you run. And so things like the climate change convention, working with plastics, other issues, like you mentioned, some people don't feel like we're ever going to achieve that ambition of reducing global temperature rise to 1.5. People feel like we're beyond that. That's a conversation. What is maybe more important is we need an aspiration to give us a long-term target and energy. Are we moving in the right direction? There's two questions. Are we moving in the right direction, even if we're not quite at the target? And the second question, especially around the urgency of some of the challenges we're facing, is are we moving fast enough? Because for certain things, if we just take our kind of slow time, by the time we get there, it's going to be too late, and we're going to have certain irreversible negative challenges that we won't be able to kind of make back up. And so
I have to tease you, right? I can tell. I got to tease you because I can see that you're working in the international arena now. Your diplomatic skills are being sharpened.
Awesome. But no, I say this because you mentioned in that it was a mouthful of things you mentioned.
Yes,
so many different things. Yeah. Climate change, plastics, trying to get innovative financing to address the problems around climate, et cetera. Breaking these things down into the more manageable pieces is critical, because we can't overwhelm ourselves with doing everything, and then trying to not get discouraged and lose inspiration because we aren't at the big target yet, but appreciating maybe the smaller movements. Sometimes the big steps, I mean, the baby steps add up too. They say the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. So that's why I say, are we moving in the right direction? Are we on the journey? And then you could start to layer it and bring in for that cumulative impact to get to the scale of the problem. And where I am now, because I work at the Caribbean region, this is something we talk about often, scale, right? We are a small island developing state. So we already are, in comparison to, like you mentioned, the big countries or some of these other places, we have challenges and issues that compared to others, the scale seems small, but it's not small to me.
No.
In my world, here in the Bahamas, you understand what I'm saying? And so we have to be able to scale and address these global challenges, work collectively across the region like the Caribbean where I work, but at the same time, as Marcia say, we have to be able to still account for, respect the local priorities, work with the local people and ensure that they're not lost in terms of their agency and their vision and what they want for themselves, their community, their children. This is still important, and so there's a balancing act amongst this tension of global and scale to address the big problems, but still maintaining what an individual would see as important and meaningful for them as a global citizen.
Marcia, you mentioned to me off camera that there is a four-tier strategy that TNC has for moving forward. You want to talk about that at this time?
Yes, so the Nature Conservancy, we kind of have like two big overarching areas where we work. Healthy oceans, fresh water and lands, and then climate mitigation and adaptation. So in the Bahamas, that comes through as us working on four major strategies. One is marine management or marine protected areas network, supporting that. Sustainable fisheries, so how do we ensure that we are managing and utilizing our fisheries products in a way that is sustainable for the long term. But also, we also work on coral restoration. So a lot of people know that coral reefs are kind of like the walls out in the sea. That's the first line of defense for storm waves coming in, but that's also where a lot of our fisheries are happening. So we're dependent on it for food, tourism, coastal protection. So we're supporting coral conservation, restoration, monitoring all of that. And then we also work on climate adaptation initiatives, some mitigation. And for people who may not be aware, so mitigation really looks at trying to do things that's going to reduce the amount of emissions or gases that we emit in the air that contributes to global warming, or we're doing something that's going to take some of those gases out of the air. That's mitigation. Adaptation is there are things that are happening like sea level rising, more flooding, maybe stronger storms, heat waves that we didn't have, drier seasons, and so these things affect our lives. So the adaptation piece is how do we adapt or cope with those changes? And so that's one of the areas that we're focused on supporting as well, the climate adaptation.
Now, I just read this week really that we're in the fourth global bleaching stage like this, which really is, poor coral. Between that and what, stony coral tissue loss disease?
Loss disease, yes.
How are they making it?
Yeah.
And
So
are they seeing that in other parts of the region as
yeah.
well?
So unfortunately, last year, from the summer going into towards the end of the year, or the fall, as Americans would say, we saw a major bleaching event, which was the latest. As you mentioned, it's the fourth wave. I guess it's debatable how you characterize the different episodes of coral bleaching, but definitely there was a significant bleaching event here in the Bahamas. We saw it showing up in many places, but this was across the region. Our teams at TNC in Jamaica, in Cuba, in Grenada, in the U.S. Virgin Islands, everywhere we saw bleaching showing up in different ways. So it was not just us, it was across the region. What's contributing to this? Many things, but of course the biggest one that people have identified is the fact that we saw many stories last summer about the hottest year on record, the hottest day on record, the hottest July, it was the hottest everything, right? So this is, when people hear these things, you may be struggling, what does this mean that, we have the hottest day ever on record, or the hottest month, or the hottest summer? The implications come back in things like the animals and plants who are used to being at a certain temperature, including humans themselves, because we also had challenges with human health and issues, they're struggling to adapt. So the bleaching is really a stress mechanism coming from coral who are struggling with this temperature change. Sometimes it results in death. So corals do not recover. Unfortunately, that is not a good thing. Sometimes, if the corals are able to fight, for lack of a better term, they may recover. And we saw both instances, I think, in the Bahamas as well as in places in the region. We saw both where we did lose coral, that they died and not going to recover. We also saw where we had some recovery in some instances. So, how does this tie back to the work of the Nature Conservancy?
I'm going to have to stop you right there because we have to take a little break.
Yes.
We're going to pick it up on the other side of the break. Stay with us. We're talking about all things related to the environment and the earth. It's Earth Day. We'll be back.